So often in this society, we make assumptions about people based on how they're dressed, based on skin color and gender or gender identity or, you know, a whole bunch of stuff. And I never could have imagined that a year and a half ago, there would be this spirit connection that would happen with Venerable Panavati and I in Michigan. As Venerable lives in North Carolina, I live in Arizona. Never heard of each other. And when we met, we felt we had always known each other. And so that's what brings me here today with you. I am so excited. I've been wanting to come to North Carolina for quite a while. And the last time Venerable and I saw one another in July, one of my dear friends who had come here to Hartwood said, "Cari, you've got to go." And then said to Venerable, "Oh, and she's got to sing." And then Venerable said to me, "Oh, and bring the Dharma." So here I am today. Cari Jackson is my name. Arizona, you heard where I live. I came to North Carolina for 2.5 days facilitating a retreat for American Medical Students Association, who are a group of medical students who want to revolutionize and transform healthcare in America. So I was just honored to be with them, and so I'm with you, absolutely exhausted. But a few years ago, I made up a word that I want you to all know. I believe it will bless you. Have you ever had those times in your life when you've been absolutely exhilarated and you've been exhausted at the same time? Well, that is me right now. And so the word I made up several years ago, remember this word because you will need it for your life, exhilarosted. Exhilarosted. And so I am trusting that with our collective energy, that more of my exhilaration and less of my exhaustion will be present as we are here together today. And so what's the next thing I do? I believe we're going to have some incense, lighting, and some music. I lit the incense earlier. I didn't smell it. So the next thing we're going to do then, I'm going to invite those who are part of the choir. We're going to sing together. And this is a song that came to my heart in July, the last time Venerable and I were together in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And the song just was washing over me. And so when my friend Sue said, "Cari, you've got to sing," we all knew that this was the song. And so blessings to the choir who will join with me in offering this song to all of you. I love you, God, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up till I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. All my love speaking in spaces that I haven't been before. I don't know any of what the norms are. And, uh, and it's wonderful because it's like the adventure of life. So what do I do now? What's before me now? What are the opportunities for me now? So I have my laptop here, but I think I'm just going to speak from my heart. I want to share with you an experience I had when I was in my 30s. I was at an outpatient mental health house in town, visiting there. It was one of the programs that was supported by United Way, and I was a staff person at United Way. And so I visited all of the programs that we funded. And this young woman came up to me and asked the question, how do I know what is reality? This is a young woman who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and she was in deep earnestness, wanting to be able to distinguish from the voices that she was hearing and what reality was. So here I was, this young 30-something-year-old who hadn't a clue how to answer her question. Not only was it that I was not trained in mental health, it was not only because I didn't know what schizophrenia was like, but her question went deep in me, because I said I was in my 30s, so that was 30 plus years ago that young woman asked that question. And I said, well, how do we know what reality is? I share that story because we're living in times now where there is this cacophony of narratives about what's happening in the world. And because of the internet, people have access to so many stories about what's real. And many have difficulty knowing, and we have conspiracy theories, we have just a variety of narratives about what's wrong in the world and whose fault it is, and what the right ways are to fix what's wrong in the world. There's so many things stirring. And so how do we know what reality is? Many years ago, when I was in seminary preparing for my ordination in the Christian church, and now I call myself Christian adjacent, just so you know who I am. And the older I become, the more interspiritual I become. And so I share that story because when I was in seminary, I read the words of a Catholic nun from the 14th century, Julian of Norwich. And Julian wrote the words, "All is well. All manner of things will be well. All will be well." So I said, Julian, that might be true in the convent, but out here, I don't know if that's really true. But again, those words just stayed with me and haunted me for years and years and years. And so I say to those of you who live in monastery or those of you who live out in the community, it's the same, because here was the thing I didn't know about the reality of Julian's situation back then. She was living through the Black Plague. And the society, whether you lived in the monastery, in the convent, or lived on the streets, the reality was impacting everyone equally. And when I learned of all of what Julian was going through, the intense loss of life that was happening, I understood her words, all is well, from a very different frame. And sometimes it takes for us to go through incredible pandemics, whether they are health pandemics, mental health pandemics, spiritual pandemics, political pandemics, for us to draw from a deeper well that helps us be able to discern what reality is, to help us discern, as Julian was able to, that all is well. Now, of course, Julian of Norwich, her words pushed me much the same way the question from the woman dealing with schizophrenia pushed me. How do you get there? How do you understand the reality that this person is dealing with, struggling with, a reality that they've come to? How do you even get there? And so what I've come to understand through the years, with all my book learning, I got a bunch of degrees. It didn't come through that. I've talked with many people through the years who I've regarded as wise, and I've gleaned some important insight, but in a way it didn't come through that either. There's a wisdom that we can acquire in different ways, but the wisdom that really transforms our lives and sets us to the place where we're able to say all is well is a wisdom that only comes through spiritual experience. And in our society, again, we have this cacophony of, this is what we should do. Here's how we should go. Here's the fix. Here's the person that will fix it. And I must confess, just a week ago, I flew from Arizona to Chicago, Illinois, to participate, to be a witness, an observer at the Democratic National Convention. And even as I was there, I was seeing this incredible sense of hope and this joy, because we've all been through multiple pandemics, some of which we're still in. And the grieving has been intense. And people looking for hope and looking for joy and looking for a way out of the pandemics that we have been in. And again, I said, there's health pandemics, there's political, there's spiritual, there are emotional pandemics. We've been through all of those. And the only way to get to what Julian understood, all is well, comes through spiritual experience. And so as much as I was excited by what I saw happening at the DNC, so much of that was centering around, oh, this person is going to help bring this to us. And in our society, we often do that. The person. And as someone who has been an ordained Christian, when I was in seminary, a colleague of mine said, it seems like you have pushed Jesus to the curb. And I said, Jesus is still very important in my life, but not as Savior. Because so much of the salvation that many of us seek comes from within. But we are socialized in our society to look to a person who will save us, who will fix it. When I was a pastor serving as a congregational minister, I used to say to my congregations all of the time, I want to teach and preach myself out of a job. because you have within you what you need. I'm honored to have the opportunity to help you know that you have it and to help you know how to access it, kind of like a coach. I think that's really what I am, a spiritual coach. And at times I've called myself a spiritual midwife. And that language is important to me because whatever is birthed or whatever is discovered in someone is theirs. It's not mine. And as a coach, and I wish we all understood ourselves as coaches, we don't own anybody's spiritual path. But to help people, whatever their spiritual path is, whatever their spiritual journey may be, to help them discover that and live that in the fullest sense. So all my life, you've been faithful. I love that song. And I decided a few days ago, as I live next to a lake. And yes, there are lakes in Arizona. So I was walking the lake in the morning and I was singing that song, The Goodness of God. And those words, all my life, you've been faithful, including the times I couldn't see it, including the times I was saying, get away from me. Only to discover that what I needed was here all the time. So many of us have been taught to believe because of the mistakes, the errors we have made in our lives. We surely can't decide for ourselves what our spiritual path should be. How are you supposed to know that? But I believe it's precisely the mistakes, the errors that we've made that have been our teachers. And the more we're able to recognize them as such. And rather than say, oh, I messed this up, to pause and say, what is this moment? What is this error, this mistake I've made? What is it teaching me? How is it guiding me? And in so many ways, I look back over my life and think about the little girl who was 6 years old in the Pentecostal church, who had her first spiritual experience. I felt this washing over me of love, just bathing me with love. And I thought that everyone in my church was experiencing the same. And then I got really confused because this love that was awashing me, I saw people being mean to one another. I saw people judging one another. And I didn't understand. I thought this thing we were really wrapped up in was this path of love. Why is there all of this judgment and this mean-spiritedness? And so for years, from the age I was 12 to the age I was 14, I wrestled with the question, is there really a God? Because if there were really a God, why would people who profess to know the way so mean-spirited and so judgmental? And so I said, surely there must not be a God. There must be nothing to a spiritual path. But what took me back to truth was my spiritual experience. It was not from the people, because we human beings show up in a variety of ways. We often profess one thing, and yet what we live is something else, and it can confuse people. It can lead people astray. It can lead people to question the truth of what they know from wisdom. And so, as much as I urge people to study, as much as I urge people to have important teachers in their lives, always to go within and discern what is the right path for me, what is wisdom teaching me in this moment. And so I say to all the people in the US and in other countries around the world who are looking to their leaders, their political leaders, their spiritual leaders, their emotional leaders, to guide them, always discern what is wisdom from your spiritual experience teaching you. And with that, sometimes wisdom from our spiritual experience aligns with our bodies. So we often in our society have become so cerebral. We think just the intellectual is that which will guide us and that which will save us. But our bodies are part of the connection to spiritual wisdom, and it's important for us to pay attention to them. And sometimes the doctors, and I told you I just came from this group of medical students, doctors know what doctors know, and we're grateful for the wisdom that they have. But there's something that our bodies know that is also important for us to bring when we're with our doctors, when we're trying to discern how to vote, when we're trying to discern what our spiritual path is. That goodness is running after us all the time. And sometimes we feel it in our bodies before it registers at the cerebral level, before it registers at the intellectual, at the cognitive level. I'm so grateful to have journeyed with my mother through her experience with dementia, because I saw my mother less able to connect with the cognitive, but her spiritual connection remained strong. I saw it. I journeyed with her through that. But it was her spiritual experience that always grounded her. Now, my mother is with me all of the time. She passed 14 years ago physically, but her spirit is with me all the time. And as I held my mother, as she was taking her last breath, I was singing to her, singing the songs that were connected with her spiritual experience. Now, my mother, part of why she was so spiritually connected is because she grew up orphaned in the 1920s. My mother did not have family to guide her. She did not have spiritual teachers to guide her. So there was something in this little girl's connection with spirit from the very beginning that kept guiding her. And if she were here, she would be up singing, "Your goodness was running after me." I can even imagine her doing that. So how do you tap into spiritual experience in the midst of the cacophony? And I use that word because it's a noise. How do you discern in the midst of all of the noise how you are being guided? And it is so much the case that in our society that becomes more and more fast-paced, the more important it is for us to still ourselves so that we can connect and have spiritual experience. But that's the only way we can tap into how wisdom is leading us. Goodness is running after us. And in the fever pitch of our society, we think we have to go faster. And so wisdom is often trying to say, and this is my language, come on, baby girl, I'm with you. Be still and know that I am. Be still. Wherever you are in the city where there's a lot of noise, in the rural area where the demands of your life may be great, getting up early if you're on the farm, where you have to make sure you tend to all of the needs of the crops, of the animals. Whatever your situation may be, if you have children whose needs you have to attend to, and if they have colds, all the harder it might be for you to get still. And so many years ago, Spirit directed me to sit with a Buddhist Sangha in the months before I moved to New York, noisy city, New York, to begin my seminary study. I didn't know then that going to my Christian church in the morning and then sitting with a Buddhist Sangha in the afternoon on Sundays was going to be really important for my spiritual experience before I began seminary. Because that context, a lot of intellectual learning, and I had to get all of that. And before I started seminary, Spirit said to me, see everything that you learn and every person you meet through the lens of who you are as a spirit in this world. Don't allow all of the cacophony of the study to overtake you. And when I was filling out my application for seminary, the question was asked in the application, what is your greatest worry about seminary education? And I said, my greatest worry is that I would be so focused in talking about God that I would not experience God. It is always so important to me to be grounded in spiritual experience. Because in the sea of our lives, things shift and change so quickly. And again, because I was at the DNC a week ago, that is so much of a reference point for me. But just a month, 5 weeks ago, people were in a panic. Those who were Democrats or those who were anti-Trumpers or whatever group they might see themselves in, people were in a panic. What are we going to do? Because Biden is not performing well. Again, this savior thing. What's he going to do? What are we going to do? And people were in an absolute panic. And in the blink of an eye, for many people, that changed. They said, oh, now Harris. We've got Harris, 20 plus years younger, and a woman of color. And we're one of the only developed nations that's never had a woman as our political leader. And I think back in the years in ancient times and in some countries today where there is this blending of spiritual leader and political leader. There were times when within Jewish history, the political leader was selected by Yahweh. And some of us believe that today. Now, I don't know what your leanings might be regarding that. But whether that is the case or not, the question is, what grounds you? Because things change so quickly. Leaders change. Leaders promise one thing and deliver another thing. Political parties, and when I think of the history of the political parties, it was the Republican Party that really brought about the emancipation of slaves in this country. And in this era, it is the Republican Party that seems to want to oppress people. So it's not in the political party. What grounds you? What keeps you anchored? So that whatever sea changes there might be, you can be able to say, like Julian of Norwich, going through the Black Plague, all is well. What is your compass? What is the point for you that helps you be able to say all is well? How often do you check in with your body and tap into the wisdom that your body might offer? How often do you allow yourself to be still? There was within the Methodist Church, one of the founders of Methodism. There were two brothers, Charles and John Wesley. And Charles Wesley used to have a practice, and it's called Methodist because they had very defined methods for their practice to help them, to lead them into spiritual experience. And Charles Wesley said that he dedicated himself to prayer 1 hour per day. And when things became chaotic, then he dedicated himself to 2 hours per day of prayer. How paradoxical that is, and how countercultural that is, and how much that goes against what we might think when things become frenzied. Many of us say, I don't have time for my spiritual practice. And that's when we need it the most. Our intellect might say, because for many of us, our intellect is the default that we might go to figure things out. And I'm inviting you to change your default. It's the spiritual experience that comes through spiritual practice, for that to be our default to connect with wisdom. Everybody else, I got to figure this out. Some things we can't figure out. I think about the wars that are raging in the world and how they press on our hearts and on our minds. Our concerns about what's happening in war-torn Ukraine, that one nation thinks it is okay to invade another nation. How we think about what's happening in the Middle East. Intellect often says, let's support these. And spirit says something else. Intellect often got us to give money to the Israelis, who have then used it to kill people who had nothing to do with the attack. Jesus was asked the question, how do you heal people? And he said, this kind comes through fasting and prayer. So even if you don't fast, pray. I have been doing a lot of fasting of late, fasting from the news. And I've been urging people to do that. I remember years ago when I started going on news fasts. I do them periodically. I go on news fasts. And years ago, I was talking with one of my brothers, and he said, "But how do you know what's going on in the world?" And I said, "I talk with people." And I said, "And I feel it. It's in the atmosphere. We can feel the anxiety." Have you ever entered a room and you could feel what was happening in that room before you entered? You can feel if love was flowing, but you can also feel if anxiety and anger were present. So I fast from the news. I know what I need to know. And as I fast, I'm more able to take the time, as Charles Wesley did, when things are all kind of crazy, to spend even more time becoming grounded spiritually. And these are the times that we need more of us to tap into the wisdom of spirit that comes only through spiritual experience. And I'm convinced, I believe in the whole butterfly effect, that every time a butterfly flaps its wings, it changes the weather around the world. I believe that. We have had too many butterflies, if you will, who've had the mic that has been keeping people feeling assaulted and keeping people feeling scared. And if you know anything about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological needs, and then the need for safety and security, those are the two most basic needs. And this cacophony has been keeping people so scared. It has been keeping people not having basic needs for food, clothing, and shelter, and for a sense of safety and security. That when it comes to spiritual groundedness, people have not been able to get there. So I believe that those of you who have tuned into Heartwood are called in this time with a very special assignment. You're called to be the butterflies who help flap the wings of spiritual experience and flap the wings of love and flap the wings that all can be well as we work together and love together. That's a very special assignment for this era. We need more of us who tap into the depth of what spiritual experience offers. That's how we help change the world. Getting anxious like most of the people in our society, that is not how we change the world. We get more of the same. We get people making decisions from places of fear. And fear-based decisions never serve us well. For almost 40 years, I've had the joy of being a consultant. Like I said, I'm a coach. So they call it a consultant, but I'm a coach. So I coach leaders and I coach organizations to help them live their missions with more integrity and more effectiveness and effectualness than often happens. And so one of the things I have seen organization after organization, by the time they call me and ask me to help, they've already spent a lot of energy and a lot of financial resources trying to fix a problem. Only when we begin working together, they realize that the problem they thought was the problem was not the problem. So I help them get still enough to discern what the real issues are, what the underlying source of the dis-ease really is, so that they can address that. And I often use the word discern because there is that word interpreted from Hebrew scripture that really is Shema Lev, which means listening heart. The more we have listening, the more we're able to discern what the underlying issues, what the underlying disease or cause of the disruption may really be, rather than spend all of our resources and our energy trying to fix something and only to discover, oh goodness, that wasn't it. And then people are in a tizzy again. We keep swirling around, making decisions that are guided by fear. They never get us where we need to be. And understand this. There are those in our society who want us to keep making decisions guided by fear because they make money. To dismantle, to tear down, to bring down some of the systems that we know cause harm to people requires that there's a critical mass of us who get still enough to dive deeply into spiritual experience. I learned from the Sangha that I sat with in Washington, D.C. before I began my seminary education. I learned the words, don't just do something, sit. It is countercultural to sit, but it's exactly what our culture needs. And so if you at times struggle with, but there's so many concerns happening in the world, isn't it a luxury for me to sit? Is that me being selfish? And some would want you to think it is selfish for you to sit. Some would want you to think it's self-serving. But it's exactly what the world needs. So the next time you hear someone say to you, you need to do something. Or the next time you hear yourself say that, because understand, we start taking those voices within. And we can say that to ourselves. You got to do something. This is what I'm called to do in this moment. This is how I am called to transform the world. Truth is, in order for us to build a huge edifice that serves the needs of multiple people, it takes all kinds of people involved in the process. It takes people who know how to do geological survey to understand what the ground is so that when they're pouring the foundation, they know what they're going to encounter, so they know all of the resources they need, what kinds of what's the word? Dig, ditch digging. Okay. Say that 3 times, Cari. Uh, ditching equipment they need, what kind of concrete they might need. All of those people have different roles. They need people who know the steel. They need people who know wood, people who know how to do the scaffolding, on and on and on, each with their own specialization. This is my specialization. And when it comes to, and just like I know nothing about building, construction industry, I also know nothing about the agricultural industry, but I will speak about that too. So never stop me, right? In agriculture, it is always important to allow certain fields to lie fallow for a while so that they can continue to produce. And again, in our society, we think we're supposed to, as if we are on a treadmill, we're supposed to produce all of the time. That's the culture. And there's nothing healthy about that culture. Let me say that again. There's nothing healthy about the culture that tells us that we're supposed to produce all of the time. Part of the method of that is to keep people always at those lower tiers of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, always at the physiological, always at the safety and security. And most of us derive our sense of safety and security from people praising us for how much we have produced. Some of us derive our sense of safety and security from people telling us how wonderful we are for what we have produced. We never get to those higher tiers. The highest tier is self-actualization. And some people, again, think that self-actualization is selfish. But that's the place from which we are able most powerfully to be transforming agents in our society. So whichever metaphor I've just offered to you, the construction metaphor, again, I know nothing about construction, but I know it takes lots of different people who have different specializations. Or the agrarian metaphor, where we've got to intentionally allow fields to lie fallow so that they have a longer ability to be able to produce. And even with the agrarian metaphor, we need people with different specializations. We need some people who will do the breaking up the soil, and some people who will plant the seed, and some people who will water, and some who need to know how to fertilize. And I love one of my favorite quotes from Thich Nhat Hanh is, when we really, and I'm not going to say the quote as it is, but he was also borrowing from an agrarian context, that sometimes we get angry with people because we don't understand. We don't really, really understand what's happening. And he wrote, when you plant lettuce, you don't get mad at the lettuce if it's not growing well. But you discern what the lettuce needs in order for it to thrive. But that takes some time. That discerning, that listening heart. What do we need? What does our society need to be whole? What do we need for people really to not see each other as enemy, but to recognize that there's really only one of us here? to discern, to have that listening heart. If that is your role in society, and I offer to you that it is, that's what brings you here. Something has called you to listen. And oh, what a difference you make, not only in your own life, not only a difference you make in the life of your family or your community, but truly you make a difference in the world. It is not selfish. It is how you help all of us to heal and to grow and to thrive and to be able to say all is well. And so I ask you today, those of you who are gathered in this space, what is it that you need to do differently? And I want you to speak back to me, something that you need to do differently to help you take more time to have that listening heart, to take more time to really have spiritual experience to guide your life. And so that's not rhetorical. I want you to speak to me. Name something that's bubbling up for you now that you commit to do differently to take more time to listen. Anyone?
Do less.
Do less.
Do less. Okay.
Get off the production wheel. Stop chugging. Thank you.
Play. I need to play.
I need to play more. Oh, play is something so sacred. It is not just for children. Thank you. Anyone else?
Be in the woods more.
Be in the woods more. Yes. There's a stillness that we connect with when we're in the woods, leaning up against a tree. That's one of my favorite things, is to just lean against or to hug a tree and to give thanks to a tree, to pause. We had and others continue to think, I'm going to say this, there was, this time of year is monsoon season in Arizona. And where I live around the lake, there were about 10 trees that fell from this massive wind and rain that came. About 10 very, very tall trees. And they were all Palo Verde trees. Those are the trees that have the green bark and go up, and they're incredible trees. And as I was walking around the lake, I paused and I blessed and thanked each tree. And I was observing other people as they were walking the lake and grumbling and complaining that the path was obstructed because the trees were there. And that's how most of us are poised to operate, because we're on the production wheel. I've got, even when we're doing our morning walk, we're doing that at a pace. How fast am I getting this walk done? Rather than pausing. And the mountains are there. And the trees, even those that have fell. And the lake. There is such incredible beauty in so many places that we often have to pause in order to see it. One of the things that I have enjoyed most about being a runner in the years that I did that and being a distance biker in the years that I did that. And I'm so looking forward to biking again, is because I could travel the same path that I traveled in my car, but because I'm going at a slower pace, I'm able to see things I didn't see before. Recognize the beauty that before was kind of a blur because I was driving to get somewhere. We are such a destination-oriented society that we miss so much of the incredible beauty and richness that are here all of the time. And I don't only mean the natural beauty, but the beauty in humanity as well, because we're part of nature. When I lived in New York, and I'm still going to come back to others of you to ask the question, so just be thinking. When I lived in New York, I had to learn how to find that peace and slow my pace. So I would go running in the morning or go biking the whole length of Manhattan before I began my workday. It was so grounding for me. And then I felt disrupted as I was walking through the city, disrupted by the numbers of homeless people who were asking for money. Because I was always trying to get somewhere. And then I said, this person is a spiritual gift to me in this moment. How can I pause and be present with this person? And so then I began having conversations with homeless people in New York. I didn't always give money, but I gave my time. I gave my resources in that way, my humanity, which was a resource that they often did not receive in New York. I spent time with them and learned their stories, learned their lives prior to being homeless, and also learned what it was like for them during their time of homelessness. And when I tell you what a rich spiritual experience that was for me, just profound to have that spiritual connection with someone whose life looked so different from mine. Got to pause to do that. So much of it comes back to what do we value most in life? Do we value most getting things done? Being known as the person who gets things done? Being the go-to person? Being the person who has the answers? We can start valuing those kinds of things when what may matter most to someone is that we paused and extended kindness, that we paused and we really saw them. Because at the end of the day, most of us want to be seen, to be valued. And in our society, people who don't have money and status and prestige are not valued. Their humanity is not valued, and they are often not seen. And so when we give the gift of seeing someone, oh my goodness, what an awesome spiritual practice that is. Because as we give that to them, we always receive something in return. So others, I ask you, what might you do differently in your life to make more time to pause, to slow down? Anyone?
I was gonna say, just pause. I mean, that can be a pause of a half hour, meditating, it can be a pause of a few seconds in the middle of a task. And read.
Just pause, whether it's meditating a half hour or a few minutes or just seconds to breathe. There was a woman who was working on her PhD when I was working on my Master of Divinity degree. And this woman was just an amazing human being. And I asked her one day, because she was a wife and a mother and a doctoral student, and she was a part-time pastor in a church. And I asked her one day, "Are you breathing?" And she said to me, "I don't have time to breathe." I'm tearing up because several months ago, this amazing woman died from a brain aneurysm. An incredible human being who blessed the lives of lots of people. I don't know how much pause she gave herself in her life. And if you're like me, one of my former pastors years ago said to me, "Cari, you have a pastor's heart." Talking about how much I love people and how much I want to help people come to their healing, to their wholeness. And it's true. And I love people, I do. A friend of mine said to me years ago, "Cari, you're walking, talking love." I really, really love people. Came out of my mother's womb loving people. And when I see people in harm, when I see people doing harm to themselves or to the others, it always grabs my heart, always. And I want to do something externally. And I always have to remind myself to discern, am I called to do some intervention in that moment in a specific way, or am I called to pray? Because praying and meditating is doing something. And so for us to change the barometer, and I'll tell you this very funny personal story. When I was in my mid-40s, I had a hysterectomy. And I know most people don't talk about hysterectomy. But anyway, when I was in my mid-40s, I had a hysterectomy. And I observed, once I was able to return to work, I said to a friend of mine, "Is something wrong with me? I really like working 3 or 4 hours a day." Now, to put that in context, prior to the hysterectomy, my average day was about 16 hours. Because I was attending to so many things in the world that I felt that I had to help heal. Did I recognize how frazzled and frayed I was? And yes, I was the same person who would ask that dear one, are you breathing? I was the same person, understand that. But here I was in this wheel of gotta help people, gotta help people, gotta help people. They're hurting. And so my friend said to me, as she knew I was, that 14 to 16-hour day person, consider this, perhaps your barometer for how much you're supposed to do was set too high. And so what you have been assessing your life by, consider, she said, has been out of balance. So earlier I talked about being true and listening to your body because there was a wisdom in your body. My body said, I like 3 or 4 hours a day. And what it offered for me was this expanded capacity to connect with spirit. Because much of what I was doing all day was keeping me in my head. Allowing more time to pause helped me go deeper into my spiritual connection. It offered me more time to play, to get on the bike, because that's my form of play. To get on the bike and just enjoy the air on my face. Oh, there's nothing like it. Even talking about it, I can feel it. So it was part of my meditative practice, if you understand. So what is your body, what is your spirit calling you to do differently so that you make more time for your spiritual connection? If I can hear from 1 or 2 more people, and then I won't bother you anymore. Anyone else?
I would take my focus. All right, where I would put my focus.
Where you put your focus. Can you say more about that?
You don't know how lucky you are that you said anything.
Speak loudly, please.
Where I put my focus. So since you're not ready to say more, may I say more on that? That is so important because our society positions us in that cacophony of information, positions us to focus on anything that will make us scared, anything that will tell us that there's not enough, anything that will cause us to divide from other people or to see other people as enemy. Our focus is often directed toward we're only as good as the last thing we did. That's where our value is derived from. So those are the things that our society would have us focus on. So when you are able to breathe and ask the question, is this what I need to be focused on right now? How is what I've been focused on this last minutes or this last hour or this last day, how is that helping me live fully in the light of who I am? What do I need to be focused on right now that will help me live in the full light of who I am? Because the more I do that, the more I live in that light, I help other people live more fully in the light of who they are. Not everybody's going to get it, and that's not my job. But some people will say, I want some of what you got. Do you know the movie When Harry Met Sally? And there's this Meg Ryan, is that the actor who plays that role? Meg Ryan plays the role of Sally, and she fakes having an orgasm in a restaurant. Now, I'm not inviting any of you to do that, But when, and there was another customer who thought perhaps that orgasmic experience that the Sally character was having, that it was derived from the food she was eating. And so this other customer says, I'll have what she's having. For us to live our lives in such ways that people just look at us and they see peace in our lives, that they see joy in our lives, that they will say, I'll have what you're having. How did you get that? There is such a hunger for peace. There is such a hunger for joy that as you take the time to connect with Spirit, from which we draw the peace, from which we draw the joy, from which we draw the freedom, people will say, I want what you got. We don't even have to tell people. You know, I grew up in a Christian tradition where we were required, if we were really good, if we were really faithful, we were going to go proselytize and tell everybody. And I used to do that because I thought that's what was required of me, to be labeled as a good Christian. But understand that was all about this external praise. That was where I derived my sense of safety and security. I didn't understand that back then. But when we are not directed by what other people say about us, but when we're really directed by the wisdom of Spirit. And I used to teach a workshop years ago where one portion of it, I talked about this Jesus figure. And again, the same Jesus that my friend said I kicked to the curb. But I said, you know, he's here, just not in this salvific way. But I said, but as a guide. I said, one of the things I liked about Jesus was not directed by criticism or praise. He just kept showing up being himself. There is something so liberatory about living like that, but that's also countercultural. But when we live like that, not directed by external praise or criticism, we live in freedom. We're more able to be directed by what Spirit within is saying to us, to be guided by that, and to be liberated by that. We live in a society that is so guided by, what are they going to say about me? And I can hear my dad now. My father, much more than my mother. Again, my mother grew up in an orphanage, so she was not directed by what other people said. She had to develop her own inner compass for her survival. But my dad used to say, if there were any disagreement happening in our home, what are the neighbors going to think? We're supposed to be the good Christians. And of course, that pissed my mother off when he said that. because she was always, well, we need to deal with what's happening here. If we deal with that, what's happening here, then what we're able to present in authenticity will be something that is life-changing for the neighbor. But let's focus on what's happening here. And so I say to you, one of the ways to dive deeply on a constant basis into spiritual experience is to let go of what the neighbors are gonna think. Let go of what family might think, or coworkers, or other people in the community might think. What is grounding me for that to be the initial guiding compass? And it takes time to cultivate that. Oh, and I want to say this. So since Venerable said, I could, go for a while, and I know you go, but I'm not going to go as long as you. And I've been in so many contexts. Spiritual grounding takes time. It takes time. And I've been in so many contexts where the minister was only supposed to speak for 15 minutes. And I said, well, you don't want spiritual grounding. You want to say that you went to church because it's supposed to look good on your community resume. We all have these CVs, if you will. But spiritual grounding takes time. A young woman asked me yesterday at the American Medical Students Association, the retreat I co-facilitated with this wonderful woman. This young woman asked me, and this was not a spiritual retreat. Understand that. This was not spiritual, but Cari's going to bring Cari. So this young woman asked me, how did you get so grounded? She's 20-something, I'm 60-something. So I said, it's taken a minute, but it really started with letting go of what people think about me. That keeps me on the hamster wheel. Letting go of what people think about me. It is a spiritual practice. Understand it as a spiritual practice. And like children, if it's not something that's part of your norm, if you are someone who's been very directed by what other people think about you, it's important to think of yourself as a child learning how to tie your shoelace. You don't get it right immediately. It takes practice. And at first, if you remember when it was like for you trying to learn to tie your shoelace or any children that might be in your life, at first, that's the only thing you can focus on. You can't have a conversation and tie your shoelace at the same time. You just have to focus on that one thing. And you're more able to learn how to do it when you let go of self-judgment. And be able to say, I'm learning how to tie my shoelace. And so if there's a practice that's not been part of your life, be aware of self-judgment and be able to turn it to, I'm learning how to tie my shoelace. And you might even say those words. Or I'm learning how to let go of self-judgment. I'm learning how to give myself permission to focus on something that's different from what the society tells me I'm supposed to focus. And we're not going to get it right out the box. It's a process and a practice. But letting go of self-judgment, letting go of what a concern about what other people are going to think about you. Because check this out, we make up what other people are going to think. They may or may not. But understand where the power and the focus is. When we're focused on what other people think about us, they have the power over us and over how we spend our time. And they might not even, there's an old fashioned word, they might not even be studying you. I don't know if any of you know that, but they might not even have noticed you, might not be thinking about you, because truth, they have issues of their own lives that they're focused on. And my mother used to say this, again, this is this young child who grew up in an orphanage and had to learn how to be self-directed in order to survive. She said, everyone comes here the same way and they leave the same way. So no one has power over you. My mother got that as a young child. No one is more important than you. Again, even if they have position and this cultural authority, and even if they have more money than you, and on and on and on, all of those factors are window dressing. They are not the essence of our soul. They are not the essence of our being. And so the more we let go of this notion of what other people think about us, the more free we can become. So here's another story. When I was serving as a pastor in a congregation, I was in this congregation that we just jammed together. I mean, we loved each other. We were getting incredible service done in the community, and there was just love and growing. And some people used to say to me, how is it that you, a middle-aged Black gay woman, are bringing so many hetero young white people into this space? And a whole bunch of other people were coming, but it was because of the love. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be seen. But we were just doing great work together. And I had told myself the narrative that if I love people, gradually, they will love me too. I developed that narrative as a young Black girl in this country who experienced so much racism. We don't have enough time for you to hear all of it, and it wouldn't bless your soul anyway. But just so much stuff everywhere, in school and workplace and neighborhoods and on and on and on and on. And so I had seen in my life that when I loved people, even those who were a little wary of me at the outset, they would come to love me. Oh, isn't Cari wonderful? You know, I used to hear that all the time. So I came from serving in a church where there was this incredible love. I went to another congregation, many of whom loved me, and there were others who hated me. And I couldn't figure out exactly why. Most of it was racism, but it was also heterosexism, because I was their first pastor, first female. And this congregation was formed in the 1600s. And so I was the first woman, and there was this wall in the church with the drawings or pictures, some were just drawings, because camera hadn't been developed yet. So there were drawings and pictures of all of the individuals who had served as the minister in the congregation. And then there was this me. That was, and I have a picture of it in my phone if you want to see it, like, because it's just an amazing picture. And I realized that while I loved people, and while that was transformative in the lives of many people, and maybe even most, that everyone had the right not to receive love. That was, I don't even know what, that was earth shaking and earth shattering for me. Because I'd always operated with the narrative, if I love people, they will love me. And so here was this new experience that I came to know was important for my own spiritual journey. I needed to know that the degree, the level of unconditional love that I had been operating at for years, that I was called to a higher level of unconditional love. It took a lot for me to keep loving people who had made it their intention and who were focused, I love your use of that word, who were focused on not loving me, who were focused on telling lies about me to help influence other people not to love me. You want me to love them too? So that required me to be more still. It was not in my external doing. I had to be still, or I couldn't accomplish this higher level of love to which I was being called. Sisters and brothers, family, we are being called to that higher love now. Knowing that there will be people, for whatever their reasons, have made it their intention not to love you. Maybe they have been given into one conspiracy theory or other, or maybe they've just been socialized in their home, in their spiritual community, whatever, to hate and revile people who look like you or who think like you or who talk like you or who represent a particular politics, like whatever it might be. We're being called to love them. And we can't get to that kind of love in all the doing. We can't. Because people will piss you off. I hope that's okay for me to say those words. People will hurt you. They will lie about you. They will say that you're selfish, that you're only thinking about you, and whatever manner of things they might want to say. But all is well. Keep being the one who draws from spiritual experience. And then all is well. Draw upon that in ways greater than you might think you need. Ways greater than perhaps you needed a decade ago. We are living in times that I believe we're called to a higher vibration And there are those who are scared of that because this higher vibration is one of love. And so there are those who keep fomenting fear to try to contrast and pull people away from love. And so you have been called and have said, yes, I want to be one of those butterflies who's flapping the wings of love. Isn't there a song about that? On the Wings of Love? Jeffrey, somebody, I forgot who sang that song. But that's all I want to say to you. We're called to love those who in our own humanity and in our intellectual and emotional self, we might say, I don't want to love that one. But when we tap into our spiritual experience deeply and not be caught up in the wheel of what are the other people are going to think about me, and not caught in the wheel of I've got to produce, the more we allow ourselves the spiritual experience. And even if that's a walking meditation, then you walk differently. Even if that is, I know Thich Nhat Hanh talked about how washing the dishes, how you do that. We need to be in that ongoing, continual, constant place of connecting with spirit. And that's how we change the world. And thank you for having said yes to be among those who are help transforming the world. We need you. And blessings to you. Blessings to you.
Tis the season now for gifts and giving all the love our hearts and dreams can afford. And when I think about the hope that you've handed out, I wanna give back all I have and then some more. Yeah, I'm only human, I can only do so much. All the miracles we need is just one touch from me, from you, helping someone who can't make it on their own. No one wants to be alone at a time like this. Only joy should exist when the world gets too much. All we need is a touch of love, a touch of love. When hard times appear, when we drown in our tears, there's faith enough to see us through. Whatever rains on us, yeah, we can always trust that heaven's hand will guide us through. Yeah, we're only human, we can all do so much. All the miracles we need is just one touch. Yeah, just one touch from me, from you, helping someone who can't make it on their own. No one wants to be alone at a time like this. Only joy should exist when the world gets too much. All we need is a touch of love. Yeah, a touch of love. He took a child to touch the world. Just think what we can do. Think of the miracles from me, from you, helping someone who can't make it on their own. No one wants to be alone at a time like this. Only joy should exist when the world gets too much. All we need is a touch of love, a touch of love. All I need is 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 a touch of love. All I need, all I need is a touch of love. All I need, all I need is a touch of love. All I need, all I need is all I need. It's all I need. All I need. All I need. It's all I need. It's all I need. All I need. It's all I need. All I